probably wondering why t-shirt and jeans. Well, in case you are, other than the excuse to finally give a presentation in a t-shirt and jeans, I thought today would be a lot more casual. And hopefully it will open it up for you to feel free to ask whatever you want. We've heard the expression, there's no dumb question. So really, ask whatever you want as we go. We've got plenty of material, but we want to make sure that as you're going through this program, finishing it up, that you've answered all the major questions you might have, or some things that may be still unclear. So make sure that you don't hesitate to ask anything today. So today it's food labels. What's really interesting is that we've just come to accept so many things that's been passed on from one generation to another as to what is healthy. And this changes all the time. It's really difficult for people like Dr. Sharilla and I, or people that are involved in this, wellness, because we just assume that knowing that a whole egg is better than an egg substitute. We just assume people know that. It's almost like having to describe why the sky is blue. It's just how do I say this? It's just elementary. So it's really cool to do a class like this, or a section like this, where we can get really fundamental with you, very elemental, and talk about some of the things that, again, we know to stay away from. Case in point, the general public is so maybe ignorant to some of these things that a commercial can run and actually turn people's opinion on high fructose corn syrup by just saying it's natural because it's from corn. And so, the general public doesn't know any better. Like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that's the kind of stuff that in this class we're going to really get into, and you're going to understand. And hopefully, when you go grocery shopping, because as you're coming to the end, you're going to have more options. You're going to be able to make better choices, okay, and not fall for a lot of the things that other people fall for. So let's get started. Welcome to Nutrition Today. These are some basics on nutrition. We need to fuel the machine. That's ultimately why we're here. I mean, food is fuel. Proteins, fats, and carbohydrates are what we call macronutrients. Okay? Alcohol is not one of them. So this is what fuels. Okay, so our bodies. This is where we get energy from. Proteins and carbohydrates provide 4 kilocalories per gram. When you look at on a food label the grams, that's what you're looking at. Kilocalories are calories. Fats provide 9 kilocalories per gram. So what does that mean? Well, years ago, that it was common sense that this is what we wanted to stay away from, fats, because they were so dense in energy. But they never considered the role fats had on insulin, where it helps to blunt that insulin response. So in the end, you can lose weight consuming fats, even though per gram you've got more energy. Okay? This leads us to something that you have to understand. And the people that go to these weight loss clinics like Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers don't understand this. That not all calories are created equal. It's not just about calories in, calories out. And this is a perfect example. Here, it would stand to reason that fats would be something we would totally stay away from, but not all different calories have different, if you will, traits and have a different response in the body. And that's one of the key points today, that the foods that we're eating, the food labels, it's not as simple as we think. There are some attributes to certain processed foods that we need to look at outside of the caloric content of that food. How many calories, how much energy it produces. Because it has a damaging effect on other parts of the body. So this is elementary, though. It's important to understand this, because this is where the outside get their theory from. They base it on this idea, how many calories you get per macronutrient. Well, then we got this other thing called vitamins, minerals, enzymes, and unknown elements, which we don't talk a lot about. But Vitamins and minerals don't give you calories, they're not energy, but they're important factors in nutrition because they are, if you will, the keys that get or the spark plugs to get things going in the body. They're essential to life. You can't live without them. This brings us to another theory that really we subscribe to, and it's the idea that it's the nutritional content of the food, not just the calories, that's very important. So if you, theoretically we can consume 1,000 calories worth of candy or 1,000 calories worth of brown rice or sweet potatoes or quinoa, buckwheat, but where are we going to get this from? We're going to get these things that we need. Remember, we need this for life. We're going to get this from the quinoa, the sweet potato, the brown rice, because those foods are more dense than these things that we need, vitamins, minerals, enzymes. This is very, very important. The processing, the process that a lot of the food industry uses to make foods available to us, especially for it to last a long time on the shelf, unfortunately, takes these things out of food. And so what we're doing is we're eating a lot of empty calories. Have you heard that term, empty calories? That's what it refers to. Empty of what? Empty of these things that we need. They're not empty of calories, but they're empty of these cofactors, the vitamins and minerals. Okay, case in point, we've talked about the cheeseburger that Dr. Shirla has, and I've mentioned the doctor in Morgantown that his has 5 years been sitting on his counter. So these things are empty. They're empty. And by the way, here's something that I can't get into a lot because it does involve a little more advanced physiology, but the body does not do well with vacuums. Okay, you present something to the body that's empty, it's going to try to fill it and make it work. This is why these vitamins we talked about last week, remember, the isolated synthetic vitamins, they don't work in the body. They don't work the way they're supposed to. And the body can make it work, but for a short amount of time. So eating foods that are empty of these things are they're not only bad because of this, because you get a gut, and you get fat, and you don't like the way you look in the mirror. The real damage here is that it takes health away from you. It malnourishes you. The founder of Standard Process, Dr. Royal Lee, would say, we are the most overfed, undernourished country in the world. Not a shortage of calories, but a shortage of this, vitamins and minerals. So this is what we need for survival. Air, water, food, sun. Sun, of course, because that's where we get our food from ultimately. That's what feeds our food source. Water is very important. Now, we can't stress that enough in this process. You need to drink more water, more and more water. I want to also say this as a little extra information here. If you've ever considered doing distilled water, I would caution you with that. Now, I know that there's some therapies out there that use distilled water for parasites, to deal with parasites. But again, that's a temporary thing. It's not something I would rely on exclusively. Spring water is best. Distilled water, again, is a vacuum. Remember I said how the body doesn't deal well with vacuums? It's been cooked. Everything's taken out of it. So your body's going to try to bring those minerals, if you will, back in the process dehydrated. So that's something that you want to be careful with as well. And of course, air. We need all this for survival. So just like we would need jet fuel for a jet, we need the best possible fuel to feed this machine. Not any fuel will do. You want to use cheap fuel or oil to keep the components working. So this is an example of poor fuel. Oreo cookies. Okay, Lay's potato chips. Can't just eat one, of course, but all these things should be a crime. It should be, especially for children who don't know any better and have been sold, a nice package. And as adults, it's part, I think, as parents, it's part of it should be given as much attention as anything else. When we teach our kids from when they're young to handle money with an allowance, but we never teach them, what a high fructose corn syrup is, or what sugar does. My daughter, it's funny because it's hard to make well, at the time when I started talking to her about this, she was 3. But she tells people in her school, and she knows, like in Sunday school, if they give her like a treat, she goes, no, because I'm allergic to sugar. You know, that to her, that makes sense, you know, allergic to sugar. But whatever it takes, I'm building that foundation right now that sugar's not good for you. You know, and it could, some might consider that extreme, and you know, one day she'll throw herself into that because you deprived her. Well, the way I look at it, I wouldn't deprive my daughter by keeping her away from pornography. It's the same concept for me. You know, if one day she gets into something like that, I've already established a foundation, and you can just hope for the best. But that's my job as a parent with food. So this is a food pyramid, and this is something that I think I mentioned before. We've got it upside down. This isn't the way it should be when we're focusing so much on grains. And Dr. Cirillo has a great explanation of how we got here. I mean, if you look at the history of how we got to depending on grains, it's very interesting. He'll talk about that later. But you see at the top, it's okay that we want to use sparingly as far as sweets, but fats and oils. And then when we get into meat and poultry, it's upside down. You know, and yes, they've got the vegetables right. You know, it should be down here, and the grains should be up there. So it needs some rearranging. But unfortunately, this is what we're taught in health class, and that's why a course like this is so necessary. Newsflash, it's not working. You know, diabetes has skyrocketed. You know, what they're telling us is not working. I mean, proof is in the pudding. It's incredible. Kids, I've talked a lot about this because, you know, it hits home for me, but when you see a child that has adult onset diabetes, it just makes you take a step back and, you know, just really think of, man, what have we done to get to this point? But it starts here. It starts in the misinformation we're getting even in schools. And then when people stand up and talk about this, they're considered quacks. Okay? One example, Dr. Atkins. You know, he said, you know, we got to stay away from carbs. People took that way overboard, but yeah, this is a part of the problem. 6 to 11 servings a day of carbohydrates is way too much. There's only one justification for this, and it's your Michael Phelps athlete. Well, he's in the pool all day long. Yes, carbohydrates are needed there more. But if you're looking for the closest parking spot to the mall, you know, your need for carbohydrates goes way down, way down. I used to teach at Columbus State, and what I taught, part of it was nutrition, part of it was resistance training. But I'm teaching them basically how to get in shape and how to get other people in shape. And they would take the elevator up to the 3rd floor. You know, I turned them around one day, the whole class, because I saw them coming out of the elevator and like, go down and come up the stairs. We're in the class to get in shape, and you're taking the elevator. You know, if you have a health concern, I understand that, an injury, but otherwise, the stairs. So those are people who we do less and eat more carbohydrates. So with the emphasis on grains and cereals, do away with real foods such as bacon, eggs, and other so-called high-fat foods. Ironically, years ago, when you were diagnosed with high cholesterol, what a doctor would tell you is go eat whole eggs. Whole eggs. That is, I mean, if you heard, if a physician that doesn't know would hear that today, they're saying, no, that's absolutely wrong. When in our reality, all the research shows that the research that is really done the right way shows that carbohydrates impact cholesterol so much more than fats. Fats have a very little impact. It actually brings down, the reason they would suggest you have whole eggs is because it brings down the endogenous production, your own body's production of cholesterol when you're bringing that in. So we've gotten away from that. And by the way, it was a long time, it was about a 2-year period. My breakfast was consistently 8 full eggs, whole eggs, and I have something else, like a little bit of oats. I put vegetables in there. My cholesterol is never, ever, ever high. So, okay, so I'm just one person, but you'd be, I think that's something that's really interesting that should be challenged. But with eggs, we're going to get into